Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Fourth Level Conversations with Killeen and Stacey Harding. We are glad to be with you today. Al, it's always great to see you. I think we've got a subject planned today that may be a little different than what people normally would expect to hear from us. And so I'll let you set that up, and then we'll get started. It's great to be with you.
You too, Stace, and welcome everyone. Today's conversation is about how to interpret the darkness from the light. You know, these podcasts are about being level 4 versus 3. Level 4 is that part of you, in my opinion, and perhaps Stacy's, is that part of you that's your soul, that's revealed by the values that are the core values your life is here to exemplify as both a pattern of how you grow to think and begin to operate as an expression of those values rather than your ego, and to have other people benefit from that. And when we do this, we come into the flow of source, of God. And whereas level 3 is an ego, we're separate beings that are struggling to survive and get ahead and be comfortable and all these things. But along the way, we have experiences, and today we're going to talk about relationships specifically. There's probably no one who watches these podcasts that hasn't had a relationship that's really tested them. It might be a divorce. It might be a child that dies. It might be a child on drugs. It might be an alcoholic parent, which I had. It might be a brother that's an alcoholic that dies in the streets of Boulder, which I had. We've all got something. And mostly, I think it I think it has a valuable role, even though it's an uncomfortable role, because it forces us to give up on the illusion of control and predictability in life and have us make a decision about life, about God, about ourselves, and about faith, and who we are to be when we're in a circumstance with someone we love that's got an aberration that's having them be dysfunctional. It might be substance abuse, it might be depression, it might be suicidal ideation, it might be emotional imbalance, it might be multiple personalities, but you love them. And that puts a lot of people in a very heavy place that I think is very challenging to deal with from level 3, but has answers at level 4 and even allows for progress from level 4 despite its discomfort, because we get to discover a new dimension of love when sometimes we have to pull back from a relationship, even though we love a person, because we can't drown with them, A, and B, it's sometimes necessary for their dharma or their spiritual path to have to complete the somersault and deal with what they have to deal with to get past it. Yeah, a lot in all of that, so I'll let you now make that all comprehensible after all those words, brother.
Oh, goodness. I think what's so interesting about this topic and the subject is I think it would be very unusual if a person hasn't had these type of struggles at one point or another, if they've been on this earth for any length of time. And I know I certainly have, Al, you certainly have, and both of us in past podcasts have shared on that. It doesn't mean that we've solved it in our own relationships. We still struggle with what we went through. Maybe we still struggle a bit with it, but I always think about this concept of awareness and metacognition, where we're aware of what's going on, how we're feeling, and think. And Al, maybe part of this in these relationships is they get carried away on emotion, and that's level 3 ego driving it, right? And if there's anything in 63 years of life that I've really come to learn is I can't really trust my emotions. They don't really lead
Right.
me in the right way very often. Certainly, I enjoy the good ones where it's exciting and I'm
Yeah.
celebrating in those. But when I'm feeling sad or depressed or judgmental, those don't lead me to a good path. And so, how do we cognitively become aware when we're feeling those things so that we don't react based on them? And that's where I
Good.
think relationships begin to get harmed. Um, and again, when we think on a grander scale, we think about we're all part of the universe and a bigger thing going on than just that moment or that relationship. And I'm trying to figure out, how do I continue to try to become an observer instead of a judger or a
Mm,
judge?
mm,
How do I, if someone is disappointing me, or maybe they're in a situation where they really don't want anything to do with me, how do I make sure that I don't, I take that deeper into myself and say, well, there must be something so wrong with me that that has happened. And maybe it's really about the other person, or maybe it's about we just both got our emotions going on the wrong path. And
mm,
then we say hurtful things, which I have done in relationships. And I need to confess that to anyone I've ever done that to in the world, that it really wasn't me. I'm sorry. And it was my emotions. And a part of growing in life and maturing is to realize that and then take ownership of it. And then don't excuse yourself to just fall back into those same patterns all the time.
mm.
I'd love to hear you expand on it as well.
Well, first of all, I think that's intellectual, spiritual genius, what you just said. Because I think to identify that emotions are the first setup for our pain, and that emotions are tied to our level 3 is genius. And what it begs as a question is, all right, well, then, if we can't really trust our emotions, because humans are social creatures, and we're going to tend to react predictably with emotions, we get attached, and somebody we love is self destructive, we want to save them, and they won't save themselves, and all that. Then the question that gets begged is, all right, well, then, where do we go that's bigger than emotions, that is appropriate response, and that is effective? Where is that, Stacey? Where do people need to go beyond trusting their emotions in such moments?
Well, um, I mean, first of all, the internal consideration of just what am I observing and so forth. But for me, and I think for what we would share with others, is the source is God and faith. For me, if I understand that there is an overall plan for my life and for the life of every human being, then my role is to play a part in a healthy approach to that with love and forgiveness and kindness and generosity, and get outside of myself. I think that's the hardest thing for any person to do, is to set aside the natural ego level 3 of self-protection, self-gratification, self-esteem, all those things, and step out of that. And the odd thing for me is that the only time I'm really happy or joyful is when I'm not thinking about myself. I'm dealing with other people. I'm
Mm-hmm.
trying to serve other people, trying to be considerate. I'm trying to not take the front row parking space. I mean, even little things like that where I can
Mm-hmm.
feel good. Oh man, you know what? Maybe that person needed help getting in, and it's better that they got that than me. So for me, the source, back to your question, is my relationship, belief in God, and that takes me to level 4, in my opinion.
I think that's beautiful. So, what would you say to as a path for people to know what to do? Let's take an example. Let's say you have someone you love who is an alcoholic, and I'm dealing with this on multiple fronts with multiple people right now. You have someone you love who's an alcoholic, maybe been to rehab 3 or 4 times, didn't take. They fall back into their habit, they keep doing it. We all know where that's going to end up. I more than anyone, with my brother dying from it in the streets of Boulder. And so you're watching somebody slowly kill themselves, who make repeated attempts and vows to stop, and then go through even support like rehab and all, and then they don't stop. AA, they don't stop. And so you have a decision to make of what do you do in that situation with someone who is self-destructing, seemingly beyond their ability to change the trajectory, the ability to change their habits, and you love them, and you don't want to see them die, you don't want to see them self-destruct, but if it keeps happening and you can see where it's leading, what is the appropriate level 4 response to that situation, Stace?
Well, that's I would say that's probably the biggest question about addictions and other things that I'm not sure I have the right answer to. Here's how I think I have responded to that and so forth is to have loving honesty with that person
Beautiful.
and to say, I love you, but I want to share with you what I've seen in others and what's likely the outcome for you. And I would start to pose the question of what's the person that you want to be? What do you think your life is worth? And I think oftentimes when I've talked to people about that, there's a self denigration that starts. I'm not worth anything, so this is why I do it.
Right.
And so then to start to express to them that I think they were created by the God of the universe, and that God loves them more than they could even imagine, and that they're a precious gift to the world. You've got your quote above the in the utility room about, and I'll let you say it to folks, but that their life is actually a gift and it's very valuable, and that in order to become the kind of person that they want to have or they have the life they have, they're going to have to face this issue and they're going to have to get help. They can't do it on their own. And I can't alone help them. So I don't know if that's the right answer, but I think that's how I've responded in those circumstances. And I've seen people get help and I've seen people not get help. Um, it's the why, right? We hear people with addiction say they've got to hit rock bottom. Well, I've seen people where I couldn't imagine rock bottom being any lower, but it gets lower.
Yeah.
And so helping a person understand those things with loving honesty, but ultimately they'll have to choose for themselves, right? Expand on that for us.
Well, I agree with all that. The challenge is that we often do that and it doesn't change things. So where I go with it is Einstein's famous quote that you can't solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created the problem. And I see this as a level 3, level 4 issue. I think people that are on a self destructive path, whether it's substances, whether it's now, if it's hardware, if it's they literally have something miswired in their brain, that's a different subject. That's one that may not be solvable or maybe can be handled medically if it's something they can do medically with your brain and all. But for people where it's a software issue, which I think is most people, that can become a hardware issue if the software has you abuse yourself long enough. You can create hardware damage if the software is self-destructive long enough. But I think for most of it, it's a software issue. In other words, our level 3 identity personality story of what life is that we maybe learned from scripting, maybe we've learned from experiences. But my answer when I deal with this, and I deal with it often with clients as you do, is you have to there's several protocols. First thing is you've got to be mindful to protect yourself. You got to make sure you put your own oxygen mask on. It's okay to suffer a little bit on behalf of others, but you can't get dragged down the funnel with them by caring so much about them that you get lost too. Otherwise, then you both drown. So you gotta watch out for your own health and monitor that closely to see how it's impacting you, to keep the resiliency to help them lift them out of the pit of poop without being dragged into the pit of poop. So you got to watch out for yourself. Secondly, I think you start with physiology. You have well, you really the second step is to grow them is to have them try on objectivity instead of subjectivity. They've got to look at the situation objectively beyond them. They've got to look at it often by looking at other people and say, well, where does this lead if you continue to drink a quart of whiskey every day? Have you ever heard that turn out well? I mean, and it's not just about expensive. It's killing your hardware. It's killing your body. It's ruining your liver and all the rest of it. And where's that going to lead? And they usually get to a point after a while where they don't care where it leads because they need the short-term hit. I remember my son when he was feeling this way. I asked him, "Well, you see it's what it's doing to you. Why do you do it every morning?" He said, "Dad, I do it just so I can feel normal for a little while." And that normal feeling gets shorter and shorter the more we advance in our addiction with substances, especially alcohol. And so we have to have them see it objectively from outside themselves. And we have to realize what's going on here is a dynamic is self-loathing. There's a part of them that knows what they're doing, and it reaffirms their lack of self-love and their lack of eligibility for self-love. Because look at what a bad person I am, how weak I am, and how, I deserve to die, becomes kind of the thought at the back of their head. For us to help them save themselves, because we can't save them, they have to be taken to a place where they can see it more objectively. And to do that, we have to get them outside of the subjectivity of their level 3 ego-based identity. We have to, and sometimes it's sort of shock therapy where we have to tell them things that the last thing they would expect to hear is what they hear. And it can help to have resources like the Bible and where there's stories of people overcoming, of course, but we have to give them a glimpse of not being who they think they are. And sometimes we can do that by offering, you know, you are somebody who has a great purpose in this life. And once you get past this, like the great ones have all dealt with something like you've dealt with, and they've gotten by it. What if this is just a test for you to overcome? Won't be overnight. I'll be there with you. And you have to take the steps and go into rehab and going to do it. You're going to have to choose to believe what happens in rehab. But consider doing it because there's the future beyond this where you're going to discover what you always hoped life would be that's never been by discovering your larger self, your level 4, your soul. It's really what I went through. I mean, I was on that path of alcoholism. It killed all my family, and it took the shock of the fear of another loved one dying from it, my son, to decide that I had to stop my habit to help save him. So ironically, my love for him saved me. So we have to get people to move out of their level 3 into their level 4 into a larger dimension. And this is where I line with what you're saying about God. Now, what do we say to the atheist that doesn't believe in God? It's the same dynamic of expanding, it's expansion of perspective. All right, you don't believe in God, but you realize in a universe that's this immense beyond imagination, you're one physical being with self consciousness that's able to be aware that you're aware, and you're living for 83 years on this little speck of a planet in a dust amidst this universe. How do you have that consciousness? You have something that is unique in all the universe, uh, to our knowledge, and so consider the possibility that this is just a time of trial that you're going to get through. I'm going to help you get through it. Rehab's going to help you get through it, but take it seriously, not just to stop drinking, but to take the next step toward that inspirational destiny that you're really here to perform. And I truly believe you are here to perform that. And I'm going to be there applauding and holding your hand and supporting you because you could be the difference in whether the world goes forward or not. Oftentimes, this whole dynamic is tied to people not having a sense of future other than the next drink. So, those don't work every time, but those are what I found as some methodologies that begin to shift people's considerations, because the biggest risk an addict has is the repeat pattern of doing the same thing at the same time every morning that takes them down the spiral. What do you think, brother?
Right on. I'll tell you one of the ones that I think are most challenging is what we might call functioning alcoholics. They're clearly dependent upon alcohol or whatever the addiction may be, but their life seems normal otherwise. They haven't lost their family, their job, their reputation, and
That
people
was
just
me.
make
That was me, by the way.
yeah, and people just make jokes about it. Oh, look, this person is. Oh yeah, they're the first to the bar and all that, and those are the toughest cases in my opinion because what they're doing still works,
Right.
and we know over a matter of time the hardware if nothing else will get impacted, right? So
Right.
there will be some health issues even if there's not social issues, and I think that our goal is to help people understand there's so much blessing beyond all that. If you can live life based on values and the level 4 we talk about, oh my goodness, it's just so it's this idea of getting to your deathbed and not having those regrets looking back, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are the tougher cases, and the ones who are suffering from their addiction, they know, and of course they're self-loathing and they think they deserve it and all that, but at least they're aware of it. It's the
Yeah,
one.
and you just gave me another insight, brother, that if somebody gets to a point where they've stopped believing in themselves, trusting in themselves, loving themselves, caring about themselves, and that's all part of the alcohol cycle or drug cycle, then do you just let them fall into the pit? Well, they may fall into the pit, but one thing you can do is you can have them look outside themselves at somebody else they love and have them remember they love their wife, their son, their daughter, whatever, and basically then make them aware of what their self-destructive loathing, self-loathing is doing to the person they love. And sometimes we will only save ourselves to save others we care more about and believe in more. I think that's what happened with me. I think I stopped drinking to try to not any longer model behavior that was killing my son. I don't know that I would have changed other than my love for him exceeded my love for myself. And so that's another strategy. And frankly, the one thing that is really uncomfortable to talk about for most people is sometimes in life you have to let people go and you have to let them experience their dharma, their spiritual path. Depending upon your belief system, if you're a Christian and you have one lifetime to get it right, to get to heaven, well, then you're turning it over to God to hope that He can see the purity in the heart, that He graces them with forgiveness as Christ did. And so they're going to discover after this body is done that, all right, well, you're coming to heaven anyway, or you aren't, whatever. I happen to be someone that has a belief system about coming back over and over, reincarnation. And so it's probably easier for a guy like me to let them go because I realize, okay, they're learning a lesson this time around the hard way. And now they're going to know what their choices were for the next life they choose. That's going to have them hopefully make better choices to where they see that to really love others, you have to love yourself. And to love yourself, you really have to love others. And both of those mean you don't indulge in the short-term gratification at the expense of your long-term health or health of your relationship with others or health with your relationship with God. And it often comes down to what you think of you. And I can promise people that are in dark cycles of self-indulgence in level 3 ego are automatically on a pathway to self-loathing. I've never seen it not be the case. And so, therefore, self love is the opposite of that. And that must mean the path toward the light. How do you discover your self love? Well, there can be a great step forward in self love by overcoming your dark tendencies. And I would say to anybody out there that's dealing with this themselves or with somebody they love, give yourself a break and recognize what you have done in life that you've overcome that others haven't. You have gotten fired and found another job. You have gotten hurt physically and you've worked hard and with physical therapy and recovered. You have overcome other challenges that other people have not. Maybe you were somebody who was irresponsible with money and you became disciplined and you built a life. You've had your conquests, which means you are capable of conquest. And you often need to talk with people that are not the traditional sources. I've had a lot of people tell me conversations with me, and it's not me, it's God coming through me. But conversations with me have been more, I just had happened the other day. Conversations with me have been more helpful than all the psychiatrists and therapists they've ever had because it's loving, it's supportive, and yet it's straightforward and it doesn't sugarcoat it. What do you think, Stace?
Yeah, I think all of that is true. And, the compelling part of what you do, I think, Al, when you're helping someone like that is just love, right? You're building a vision for them to see the value of who they are and that they really aren't that alcoholic. They really aren't.
Mm-hmm.
They're much greater than that. That's just the manifestation of their ego protecting whatever they're afraid of.
Yeah.
And so I'm not surprised by you being able to help people in that way. I think obviously sometime when you go to psychiatrist, you have mental issues. There's something in your mind that is not right. And so we're going to try to help you see that. And in some respects, you're doing the same thing. You're just getting there faster and more direct, and you're not trying to suggest to them that they've got issues beyond just understanding who they are. I was curious as we were talking about this. I'd love to have you expand a little bit on, okay, let's move away from addiction to relationships. I've shared my struggles, and you've had struggles, and there probably are people that are in the midst of that today where they're thinking about getting divorced or separated, or they're thinking about that they don't want to be involved in a family relationship any longer. Maybe it's a professional one. How do folks recognize that they actually have the ability to work through that without just having to defend themselves?
That's a great question. And my experience tells me that you have to start by asking yourself why you want to escape the relationship, because those are often level 3 motives. She got fat, she's not pretty any longer. He got a big belly, he's not handsome anymore, he's not attractive. He got fired, he isn't making money, he can't protect me. I saw somebody at work that's cuter and I wonder what he's like in bed. Whatever. They tend to be surface, superficial relationships, and that just creates more karma. So I think you have to investigate, why do you want out? And do you want out for a level 3 or a level 4 reason? If it's a level 3 reason, don't necessarily trust it, but consider it a teaching that, all right, well, maybe it isn't about the person that's a trigger. Maybe it's about something I need to work on inside me. And by the way, back to the addiction as well as in relationships, one of the reasons we have so many of these issues that are so traumatic at level 3 is level 3 people live outside to in. They live in response to circumstances and other people's opinions, and they're basically playing defense in life of trying to craft an image in the minds of others in hopes that it reflects back to where they can find self-acceptance. It's how the ego operates, which is why it's a hungry ghost that never gets satiated. But level 4 lives life inside to out and realizes it's an inside job. Everyone who's listening to this, your life today is a reflection of your past decisions. And yes, there are other circumstances that have impacted the life, but your response to those circumstances is going to determine your trajectory, either toward fulfillment or toward depression. And I think a lot of it has to do with, are you living outside in or inside out? If you're living inside out, you're taking responsibility for your life. You're saying that nothing's an accident in my life. It's all happened. And I didn't know that I was creating it, but I was creating it, or at least co-creating it. And so we have to get people, when it comes into situations like you described of relationships that are challenging and maybe I want out. Why do you want out? Do you want out for the right reasons? Now, what are the right versus wrong reasons when it comes to escaping a relationship? Just to get out of what's uncomfortable, or she's boring, or he's not attractive, or, we aren't as rich as I want to be, and I bet I could find somebody else or whatever. There's a lot of that goes on, and that tends to not get cured just by leaving. You just replace them with the next one. But if you do it from level 4, you realize really maybe the only valid relationship, the only valid reason to abandon a relationship from level 4 is if it helps the other person take the ground they need to take, even at the pain of losing you. Sometimes you have to be a sacrificial lamb, Stacey. I think, without getting into the details, I think in some ways that's how I see you with some of the things you've gone through, is whether you knew it or not, God was using you and other people's social story of their relationship with you, that using you to help them learn some valuable lessons about life, that it's not permanent in this dimension, and it's not controllable, and we have to not confuse love with attachment, and we have to allow other people their path. I think you're a teacher of humanity, and I think you have in some ways been a sacrifice of what's probably caused you emotional pain for the benefit of other people. Sometimes love means leaving, and that's something that's irrational to a level 3 person. But sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to allow people to face their karma, to get through the lessons they need to get through to ever get past this hell, because band-aids don't work. Rehab rarely works. AA rarely works. They're warehouses. They're places to have a temporary stop in the downward cycle, but by and large, they don't do much more than have you be able to get to another day, one day at a time. Um, and those are at best temporary solutions. For a permanent solution, you need a wholesale transformation of consciousness. You need to have people arise to a larger dimension of who they are beyond their physicality and their personality. If we're successful in life, we get to the end of life and realize that the great blessing of life was to realize that it wasn't just about this life. I'm an infinite being as a part of God. And this has been a process of discovery by going through the illusion that I was a separate something that had to struggle for life. Sometimes we have to let go and let God, and that includes relationships. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think just thinking back my own circumstance, I think this might be helpful to people. I think what can happen to people is, especially in important relationships, whether it's a marriage, it's uh, children and parents, whatever it may be, is that level three ego can create drift. Hey, I know this relationship's important, so I'm not going to bail, but I'm just not going to. You don't listen to me, so I'm just going to drift. And it's not even necessarily conscious, but it's just there's drift, and then all of a sudden you drift far enough in that relationship, then fighting for it maybe doesn't seem worth it anymore. And that's probably what happened to me. And it doesn't mean that I handled that well at all, Al, and I'm sure I didn't. But level four is the answer for all of this. It's getting beyond ourselves and getting beyond our egos, moving into consciousness and letting our values and all of those things drive our behavior, our decisions, our desires. And I've just watched it with you, Al, with your family and the circumstances and the love that you have for your family and for people is why you're able to operate at level four, in my opinion, all the time. I know you will say you don't. But it appears to me that you generally spend most of your time with an awareness of love and consideration of others, and that you're on a mission. We've talked about this being a mission from God that we're on together. And I do believe that. And you talk often about you're just a tool or a broadcaster from the creator and so forth of helping people. But I think in relationships, if we, particularly those ones we can take for granted, it's dangerous not to lean in when you feel struggle. It's really dangerous not to lead in.
Yeah, and sometimes what I find, and I find this even on calls with clients, if something is a particularly challenging conundrum with a lot of complexity, I don't want to answer quickly. I want to pause. Sometimes the best thing we can do is allow ourselves to not respond in this tendency we have of hit the tennis ball back and forth in a dialogue. Sometimes it's important to pause and to hesitate before you answer and get quiet between the thoughts. I have an image I've been using lately, Stacey, that our reality is our thoughts, but there's a larger reality beyond our thoughts. And part of meditation and other spiritual practices is to recognize that thoughts are not reality, they are just what we're telling ourselves. And so I think of thoughts as clouds. And if I can see thoughts as clouds, I immediately don't identify by being in them. I see them as options of consideration, not things I have to become and respond to. And then I notice between the thoughts, in the quiet, in the silence between the thoughts, I literally see an image of white clouds at night, and I see the universe beyond the thoughts. I think the power of God and truth lies in the great infinite silence of the universe beyond the thoughts. And when I remember that, that's where I go in my pauses between the thoughts to the silent mind. And it gives me an openness to receive the answers I need for what has to happen next, even if it's continued silence, and let the karma of the situation play out. So there's a lot of things in life that are above our pay grade that we're not going to be able to answer. And authenticity, honesty, expanded awareness, and the silent mind that isn't sculpted by thoughts that have an agenda are often the tools I have to use to get to an answer from my heart rather than my head. And at the end of the day, what everyone needs to know, including people listening to this podcast, is despite whatever story you have about yourself, based upon your mistakes, based upon your imperfections, based upon what other people have thought, based upon what other people have said, based upon your experiences of having been divorced, rejected, fired, whatever, you are a piece of God. You are love worthy, therefore. And the question isn't whether you are love worthy or you're worthy at all. It's just a question of whether you can get past the illusion of your level 3 ego that's busy making the case for why that isn't true, and silent that ego enough, and then you will automatically experience your level 4. And when you do, you can flow with what is, and that includes up to and through the experience of your own death without fear, without panic. When we can get there, that to me is enlightenment. That is Christ consciousness, because now you're really relating more to the infinite nature of God, and therefore who you are a part of, than you are this temporary bacteria that you are, called Alkaline or Stacey Harding, as a little piece of life on this little obscure planet in this obscure wing of the Milky Way. I'll let you bring it home, brother.
This idea of your thoughts being clouds and pausing and so forth, it made me think about the idea of controlling our thoughts. And we actually can. If it's pretty hard to be negative if you're thinking about a cute little puppy.
Yeah, right.
uh, we actually can, and I think that's something I've lied to myself about over time, is that, well, I thought I can't control what I think about or what I worry about, and you and I have talked about being warriors in our lives. But I was thinking about this and relating it to this thing, golf, that I like to play so much, and I can almost tell what kind of a round of golf I'm going to have by what my thoughts are going into that. Am I
Mm-hmm.
positive today? Am I like, I can do this? And when I think that way, it's almost golden. But the
Right.
minute I get a bad shot or something, if I go negative, man, it just goes south. And so I can't tell you how many of my friends that I play golf with, Al, that know about level 3 and level 4 thinking, and think of it. And we are literally on the golf course saying, okay, let's respond with level 4 after that bad shot just happened.
Yeah. You know what's so telling about that is, back when I golfed, and I've never been the golfer you were, but back when I golfed and I'd have a good round going, maybe through 9, you're going to shoot in the mid 70s, which would have been landmark for me. That's every day for you, but that would have been something I hadn't accomplished. You start to think, wow, you start to add it up, and you start to think, okay, 9 more holes. Well, it changes what got you through the first 9 holes. And why is that? It's because your ego is now adopting the story of a sub 80 round as something to brag about on the 19th hole with your friends, or how much they're going to admire you, how much you get to feel like you're improving as a golfer. But what got you through the first 9 holes at par was flow. And so the space between the clouds is remembering flow. And I basically, this'll seem kind of as a funny way to end this, but I send myself emails, and one of the emails I have that I've sent myself, and I don't know if you can see this, but it's an email that is in the subject line, says "Just flow now," and I keep this on read in my email chain by design every day. I just marked it, so I have to mark it as unread again, so that when I call up my emails, and I encourage people to do this, send yourself in your moments of enlightenment that it's really just about being in the now and flowing, and give up on the illusion of control on it. When you get one of those, send it to yourself as an email, and leave it in your email chain so it always comes up in the subject line, because I have a self-programming in half a dozen emails to remind myself of my more enlightened glimpses of the face of God, of a quiet and full heart, of an eternal perspective, of a loving gratitude for all of it without concern for what happens next. And you need to grab those moments like fairy dust and get them in a jar and put them in your email and look at the jars so that you can remember the case for life. Because what this comes down to is we're being lost in software habits that lead to hardware habits that are destroying relationships. I still believe that's all part of it. It's not like there's not going to be dark moments. There will be, but it's in moving beyond the contrast of the yin and yang fighting each other to seeing the whole of the fact that both are part of the whole trip, but there's something bigger than either one of them, which is this dimension of infinity that we all are a part of, that we have trouble recognizing in the confines of a level 3 ego. How would you like to close this, brother?
Well, I think that last little nugget, if nothing else in this podcast, that was huge. Treat yourself to those thought controlling opportunities to help yourself. That's a great, great idea. Well, we're always grateful to have people with us, whether it's 1,000 or 1,000,000 or it's 2. Al, we love
you and I
together.
are here, brother.
So I know I gain value every time. So we're grateful for anybody watching, and we're here to help if we can. Al, I love you. Thank you for the time today, and we hope everybody has a great day.
Love you too, Stacey. And even though I don't know anybody that watches this, probably you're loved. And the most important person for you to be loved by is you. And you're not going to be able to do that from your level 3 ego. You've got to get to your level 4 that sees beyond your imperfections, because part of the way this is all set up is the temptation to see our lack of perfection at level 3 is actually a reveal of the perfection of level 4. Because if it left us there, we would live in hell. But heaven is always just as far away as getting out of the illusion of your separateness and your level 3 ego. And then there's nothing more to really do, because it becomes self-evident and apparent. Blessings to all of you.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.